In this lesson, we're going to talk about large assembly mode. Large assembly mode allows SOLIDWORKS to open up large assemblies with preset settings specially made for large assemblies. Let's take a look at the motorcycle assembly and play around with the large assembly mode settings. Go to your SOLIDWORKS working files for 2013. At the top level folder, there is a motorcycle folder, and then you can press the Filter Top Level Assemblies option and click on the motorcycle assembly. Notice that this assembly takes a couple of minutes to come up fully, and depending on your hardware, it may take even longer. The settings in large assembly mode will help you deal with long rebuild times and long open times for large assemblies. This assembly is not even really large. One way you can tell how large an assembly is to go to your Tools menu, Assembly Expert. The total number of components here is 60. We've got 5 subassemblies with a maximum depth of 3 subassemblies. A large assembly can vary in size, but there are SOLIDWORKS assemblies that exceed 10,000 individual parts in size. This will vary substantially because some assemblies have parts that are more complex than others. For example, this assembly does have some surfaced features. The saddle, the gas tank, the handlebars are to some extent surfaced. Even the rear fender has some surfacing on it. More important than that, though, is often the detail, and there are some small detailed edges on the engine and some of the other components. Let's take a look at the settings that are specific to large assemblies. Go to the Tools Options dialog and go to the Performance page. The performance of large assemblies is dependent on a couple of different things. First of all, how your components load, and second of all, any interrelationships that they may have. In-context relationships will significantly slow down the rebuild time for an assembly. And the number of small edges or detail in the display will also slow down how long it takes SOLIDWORKS to display the entire assembly to you. There are settings in the normal use of SOLIDWORKS that are going to be important for assembly performance, such as automatically load components lightweight. This will load only visual information and will not load parametric or body data. Always resolve subassemblies. This is an important one to have turned off if you're working with large assemblies, especially if those large assemblies use subassemblies to help distribute the rebuild load. Some of these other settings should also be obvious. Check out-of-date lightweight components. From a performance point of view, it's the best idea to not check. Resolve lightweight components. Since your only options here are prompt or always, I would select prompt. Although waiting for a prompt in some cases is slower than just resolving the component. Rebuild assembly on load. Again, this one should be set to never if you are concerned primarily with speed of your assemblies. Remember that using SOLIDWORKS is very often a trade-off between competing interests. You will have interests such as speed and other interests such as always seeing the correct geometry. And these two will be in conflict much of the time. SOLIDWORKS has also recently added some tools for working with configurations. And if you're working with large assemblies with configurations, some of these should be important to you, such as purge cached configuration data. And then you can work with individual configurations for saving cache or purging cache. Let's move down to the Assemblies page. And this is where the large assembly settings exist. This is also where you establish the threshold for what SOLIDWORKS will consider a large assembly. If you have prismatic parts with simple faces, not a lot of complex geometry such as springs or threads, then a large assembly could be specified at about 500 parts. A large assembly can be defined as anything that taxes your computer or makes it work more slowly than you would like it to. There are times when an assembly of 2 parts, or even an assembly with only a single part, will tax your computer, if the part itself is complex enough. So this large assembly's threshold will vary for different types of users. If you are developing a vacuum cleaner with a lot of plastic parts, where each part may have in excess of 1,000 features, then your threshold for large assemblies is going to be very low. If you are working with plate parts with mainly drilled holes, then your threshold is going to be much higher. We can also tell SOLIDWORKS what to do when large assembly mode is active. The first thing you should turn on is the option to not save auto recover info. Auto recover info is saved so many steps, and it will just add additional time in the background when it's not even working on things you want it to work on. Hide all planes, axes, sketches, curves, and annotations. This is probably important when you're working in a large assembly. If you're working on geometry that requires the display of planes or sketches or that sort of thing, you should probably be working on a lower level assembly or even a part itself, especially if you are concerned about performance. Working on parts in the context of an assembly will tax your computer from a graphics point of view as well as the computational CPU side of things. Do not display edges in shaded mode. Although this is my preferred display style, it does slow things down significantly. The fastest display style is just straight shaded. Do not rebuild when switching to an assembly window. This is important as well when you are working with large assemblies. This option for using Large Design Review is new in recent versions of SOLIDWORKS. Large Design Review is really more about the physical size of the design, although it can be used to mean performance criteria for large design as well. Large Design Review is essentially a viewer rather than full-blown SOLIDWORKS, and it limits what you can do with the model. You can also invoke large assembly mode manually. If you go to Tools, scroll down. If you have access to your entire menu on your display, you'll be in a better situation than I'm in. From here, I can select large assembly mode, and SOLIDWORKS has turned off the edge display, and now I'm just looking at the model in shaded. It has also turned off things like real view, so special materials that you may have applied will no longer be visible when working in large assembly mode. You can tell that you're in large assembly mode primarily from the notice on the status bar that calls out large assembly mode. You can turn it off again by going back to the Tools menu and turning off large assembly mode.